So I am not presenting this class on behalf of MAPS Business Coaching. This is actually my material, and it's just something I want to share with you. But they're allowing me to still use their marketing and branding with that. So MAPS Business Coaching is the coaching company that I'm certified through, and this is just their mission statement. We create sacred partnerships that require the best in us to bring out the best in them. And now, how do I advance slides? There we go. So a little bit about me. A couple of you know me. I learn from teaching. Oh, let me see if I can unmute you, Greg. Sorry. That's funny. It won't. It keeps bringing up a menu down there. All right. So I learn from teaching, and I study a lot. And if I don't teach it, I don't seem to absorb it well. So this Peace in the Storm class and managing multiple priorities comes out of a lot that I've been learning in my own life, and I want to share with you. I have 5 kids. I have 4 stepkids now. 7 of them are teenagers. And at one point, I had a team of 8 on my real estate office, 3 in diapers. While I homeschooled my oldest, and I was still doggedly determined to keep the house spotless and have dinner on the table every night. And I was volunteering a lot. And I was experienced after that abusive and life-threatening relationships and had to live on the run. And I'm not sure if everybody knows what happened in my brother's life, but he lost his son unexpectedly right before his 2nd birthday. A couple of years later, had a daughter, and then lost her unexpectedly before her 2nd birthday, and it turned out to be genetic. And then 5 years after that, he passed away himself, and I'm sure it was really just from a broken heart. So our family has been through a lot with that, losing 2 children and my brother over the last few years. So I know the storms that come, and I know having to manage and juggle just more than is humanly possible. So this is what I learned through all that. I am still a recovering please everyone-aholic. I can't say recovered because one of my biggest fears is still to let people down and be pretty much anything less than perfect. So that's about me. Let's see. I've got to learn how to advance slides here. All right, here is John. Good morning, John. I don't see you. There you are. Good morning, John. I was just telling you about myself and my background. I'll fill you in since I just passed it and there's only a few of us here. So I have 5 kids, 4 stepkids, 7 of them are teenagers, and I have been through a lot of chaos in my life. Running a real estate team with 8 agents, trying to homeschool my oldest, having 3 in diapers, and trying to keep everything perfect at home while I volunteered, and then went through a lot of tragedy in my family, and ended up after that in some abusive and life-threatening situations. So I've had lots of chaos to deal with. And this class has come out of what I learned with that. So this is just something, again, about MAPS Business Coaching. MAPS Business Coaching is not affiliated with Keller Williams. I know you'll see Gary Keller's name here, but it is owned by Gary Keller. It is in MAPS Real Estate Coaching is the largest coaching company in the world that coaches real estate agents. And out of that, and his book, The One Thing, he opened up a separate company that just does business coaching, and it is for other businesses that are not real estate related, and it's not affiliated with Keller Williams, but we use a lot of the principles if you're familiar with those. So a lot of the things that we draw from are the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, and we use those principles and systems. And if anybody's been through Bold, A Life by Design, some of the principles there, and we're partners with them. All right, ground rules for the class. Be prepared with a pen and paper. You'll need it for some exercise that we're doing. I say, maybe because I have kids, go to the restroom, grab a box of tissues, refill your coffee or water, turn off your phone, social media, and other distractions. The next thing is whatever I say is not true unless it's true to you, and that learning is a complete waste of time, energy, and excitement if you don't implement. So this class is not intended to be a drug to get you motivated and feel good for a moment. If you find that what I say is true for you, get real about what it will take for you to do to implement these principles in your life, not today or next week or when you happen to remember, but as a habit and a way of life. So that's the rules for the class. The next thing is identifying your guiding principles. This class is about peace, and peace is just one of 12 values that I hold in my life and I work towards attaining. Um, if you ask someone what their values are, you're going to get different answers or slightly different answers than if you ask someone what they value. So when I started writing out what my values are, I took a little bit of a shift and asked myself instead, what do I value? What do I place value on in my life and what do I want in my life? And that's when some things started coming up like peace that would not show on a traditional list of values. Inside of that, I study peace a lot. And how do you bring peace to your life? What does it mean? And what are the guiding principles that I use to make sure that I'm bringing peace to my life and keeping peace in my life? So the guiding principles are what we're going to be going through today. And I encourage you as you go through. My other values are love, creativity, adventure, unity, fidelity, freedom, truth, stewardship, humility, and impact. To just think about what are the principles that you need to employ in your life to bring those things about. And I'll be teaching a class, the idea is on each of those as we move forward, and this one's on peace. So what is peace? Peace is a state of tranquility or quiet provided by security or order. 2, freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions. And 3, harmony in personal relations. Those were the top 3 definitions. So the first one you're going to see, provided by security and order, is going to be peace in your environment. Number 2, freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions is peace internally, and harmony in personal relations is peace in relationships. So we're going to be going through those 3 types of peace and focusing a lot on peace in your environment, just because this is business coaching and peace in your environment has a lot more to do with how you're running your business. But the other areas are important too, or they'll distract you from being able to do what you need to do. There's been a lot of focus lately on internal peace, but there's a lot we can do to bring peace to our external environment. So we'll be looking at that next. Peace in your environment. If you have a dozen kids or aging parents, if you're doing everything by yourself, if you're running a business or 10 businesses, if you're getting pulled in 1,000 directions, it is time to recognize that it's storm season in your life and you have to be ready for a storm to hit before you've even had a chance to clean up from the last one. So how do you clean up from the last storm? Get ready for the next, keep your eye on the horizon, and still honor your day-to-day responsibilities. We're going to be covering that here. Our pet tornadoes. How many of us have pet tornadoes? That's what I call our to-do list. And they're pets because we feed them. Chaos is a state of confusion or disorder. And a lot of the disorders and anxieties, insomnia, heart disease, things that we're dealing with right now are a result of that state of confusion and chaos in our lives and not having control of things. So when you're feeding these tornadoes, that's what ends up happening. So how do we recognize what's in our tornado and start cleaning that out? So here's where we come into the guiding principles for peace, and this is my first guiding principle for external peace: is don't feed your tornado. So that means saying no is the first thing, and delegating, single-handling things and taking them to a finish and getting it on your calendar. So our primary source of stress is going to be what I call open cycles of action. These are ideas in your head or things that you've actually already started that you've never taken to a finish. And the more of these cycles that you have going on, the bigger your tornado is going to be. Um, we try to multitask and we end up starting a lot of things and then putting it on the back burner and putting it on the back burner and pushing it off of the back of the stove sometimes and moving on to something else. And all of those things that get started and not finished are our source of stress and disease and things that are causing anxiety and insomnia and lots of problems in our lives. So this is about identifying and closing cycles of action and not opening new ones that are not necessary and aren't moving you towards where you want to go in life. So the other principle that's part of this is don't let others feed your tornado. So and this is more about paying attention than saying no. This is recognizing when to say that's enough and cut it out. So an example would be you go to the grocery store with your kids, and how many times have you gotten home and you're unpacking your groceries and you find stuff that you never knew went in your cart to start with? And you didn't say no, but you allowed it just by not paying attention. So this happens in a lot of other areas of life, and we call it people taking advantage of us or letting people take advantage of us. But the real truth of it is that we're just not paying attention. So pay attention. Don't let people put things in your grocery cart that you don't intend to pay for, and get them out of your cart. Now, in real estate, I'm going to go back to real estate because that's my old world. We call this adverse possession. If you let somebody sit on your property and use it for 20 years, even if you didn't tell them it's okay, if you didn't bother to kick them out and you knew about it, or you should have known about it, they'll end up owning your land. And that's what happens when you let other people feed your tornadoes. So, pay attention to your grocery cart. Pay attention when you're checking out the cash register. Check your receipts. Recognize where you're allowing others to take advantage of you and let them fail. So that's something that a lot of us are afraid of doing, is letting other people fail when we care a lot about them. And there's a lot to study there about boundaries. If that's something that you need to study, there's some good material out there to read. All right, guiding principle number 2 is build a fortress. Don't build on the path of a storm. It may sound exciting, but don't put yourself in the middle of the drama. Don't hang out with storm chasers. Don't try and do every new thing that sounds exciting to you. The next is give yourself space to see the horizon and be prepared. If you are rushing from one thing to the next and you've always got your head down, inconveniences and tragedy are going to just smack you out of nowhere. You won't see them coming. So you have to time block time for reflecting and planning. And then look at what's going on in your life and what you're doing in your everyday, and ask yourself the question, what could be coming at me if nothing changes? Giving yourself space to I've got a 15-year-old. He's about to turn 16 this month, and we're trying to get all of his driving hours in for his permit. So on Saturday, he is behind. So we just went on a road trip and we drove for 9 hours just to get his time in. And we were going through mountain passes, and it was his first time on the interstate. But when we were up on one of the basins, there's a long stretch of road where it's hard. It feels very slow to go less than 80 miles an hour. So we're going through there, and there's an intersection. And there was a semi truck in front of us and 2 cars behind us. And a car pulled left out of the intersection into our traffic, and the semi truck slowed down tremendously, like more than you would expect for a car pulling out in front of him. So the assumption of everyone was this car pulled out in front of this semi and went very slow and slowed the semi down. So the car behind us got very frustrated with all of this and decided just to pass the whole lot of us, right? So, including the semi truck. So I had been telling my 15-year-old, like, you have to leave room, slow down faster, slow down sooner. And he is getting a little bit frustrated with me because he's like, the semi truck's just having to slow down. He's thinking we're just having to slow down here. Well, it turns out the semi truck had slowed down, not because the car cut him off, but because he was turning left at that intersection and he didn't use his blinker. So when everyone thought he was just slowing down, he was really coming to a complete stop. And no one was compared or prepared for him to come to a complete stop, especially the car behind us. So the car behind us swerved around everyone and was going to pass the semi, but by the time he realized what was going on, the semi was already turning left and had blocked the lane that he was going to be using to pass us. So he had to swerve between us and the semi truck. And if there wasn't room there, he wouldn't have had anywhere to go, and there would have been an accident. So I reuse that for an analogy, because you don't just leave room for yourself to stop. You have to leave room for others and the decisions that others are making too. So when you're not jamming your calendar too full and you're not having too much on your plate, it lets you watch. It leaves room for not just for things to go wrong that you do wrong, but for things to go wrong that other people go wrong. Because if it happens to you, it's still your responsibility, even if it wasn't your fault. So that's how you're able to take responsibility for that. And there's no way to, if you have your head down, if you're not watching, if you're not leaving room, you're going to have things smack you in the face and you're going to have more accidents happen. And we have enough that we can't control that even if we do leave room, to not put ourselves in those kind of situations. The next thing is to build something strong enough to withstand the storms. We can exhaust ourselves fighting against forces in our lives that we can never overpower. So here's where everybody's trying to push and fight and force things, and building something strong doesn't have anything to do with pushing back or fighting or applying any kind of force. It's just building something strong enough that when those winds come, that you're not getting knocked off of your values. So this is where you define your values and you exercise them, and that's how you get strong. That's where the strength comes from, is exercising your values and not letting people push you around and be steadfast. So I'm hearing an echo for myself somewhere. I don't know if everybody's hearing that. So anyway, don't let the tailgater push you around. Don't back down from what your values are. But that does not mean pushing back. It just means being steadfast in what you know is important. So that's guiding principle number 2, is building a fortress. All right. Number 3 is going to be confront your tornado. So you've built a fortress. You're saying no, but you still have a tornado full of things that you've been putting in there for a long time, because something comes along and you're like, you don't handle it, then you're like, all right, let me just put that in my tornado. And you've got other people just putting things in your tornado and you don't even know what's in there. They're all just open cycles of actions that are just not closed out and are swirling around. And it's hard to even know where to start because it's complete chaos in most people's lives. So the only thing that you can do is to just grab one thing and make one thing be still. And just do that one at a time, is take one thing at a time out of your tornado and make it be still. And then take something else out of your tornado and make it be still. And the way that you make it be still is you just ask yourself a few questions. See, is this mine? Does it belong to me? Because you know you've got other people you should have said no to or who didn't even ask. Is this mine? And if it's not, let it go. Or if it's something that you're trying to control that you don't have any control over, then let it go. And then number 2 is this even something that I want? When we do goal setting to the now, We look at your big someday goal first, because what we think that we want today, like right now, in the grand scheme of things, when you're looking at your big goals, might not be taking you in that direction. It might not be something that you actually want. So look at where you want your life to be someday, in 20 years or 10 years, and what you want it to look like. And then we go backwards from that. Then what's your 5-year goal? What does your life look like in 5 years? What does your life look like in 2 years? Does your life look like in 1 year? And what do you need to be doing this year, this month, this week, today, right now, in order to achieve that? So when you look at it that way, this might not be something that gets you there, and it might not be as important as you thought it was to you. It might not be something that you want. So that's the second question you ask. The third question you ask, if it is yours, it is something that you want, then you go, can I handle this right now? There are a lot of things that can be handled immediately that we just don't want to, because we're not 100% certain on what we need to do or how, and we just stick it back in the tornado. But if you give it a little bit of thought or do a little bit of research or just confront it, and confront just means to get face to face at it with it and look at it. So get face to face, you're looking at this, you're studying it and saying, can I handle it right now? And if you can handle it right now, just handle it. Don't put it back in your tornado. If it's not something that you can just handle right now, then can someone else do it? But the thing is to don't try and delegate things that you can handle right now in 3 minutes. So a lot of times we delegate things that we don't want to do when it's things that we should be doing and that we could have done ourselves in less time that it took to delegate. Now, if it's something that's going to be that repeats all the time and you're spending this 3 or 5 minutes over and over again, then yeah, train somebody else how to do it and then delegate that. But if it's one thing, don't try and delegate one thing that you can have handled in 5 minutes. So number 4 is, can someone else do it? And if someone else can do it, then have someone else do it. This does not absolve you of responsibility, though. If you delegate it to someone else, still put it on your calendar, because it's still your responsibility to make sure that it's done. So set a time to follow up with them and make sure it's completed. If you don't, it's still going to be an open cycle of action in your tornado in your head, unless you know that it's closed. So just make sure that you know that it's closed, not necessarily for anybody else other than yourself, so that you can get the cycle of action closed and have a little bit more peace in your life. Now, let's say you can't handle it now, someone else can't do it, this is something that you have to do, then can you put it on your schedule right now? Is this something that you can block a day out to, let's say it's doing your taxes or something like that? Then put a day on your calendar to work on your taxes. Can you put it on your schedule right now? Some things that are open cycles of action for you are big goals. It's your someday 20-year thing that's out there. It's winning a Grammy or something like that. You can't just schedule that and put it on your calendar. And it's what you want your life to look like. So if that's the case, then put a pin in it, right? That's what what we call a GPS is for. It's the goal setting to the now. It's what we need to be doing every week to be working towards that. Put that on your someday plan. And then the other thing to ask yourself is, what will be damaged if this doesn't get handled? You might have really looked at this and tried to delegate it and tried to see if it's something that you can do right now and not been able to get it on your schedule. And it's something that you're putting on a big someday plan. What will be damaged if it doesn't get handled? So there's 2 things here that can end up happening. You can just put it back in your tornado and not handle it now and accept what's going to happen and accept the consequences, or you can put a plan into place to work towards getting it done, and take baby steps towards it. All right. Guiding principle number 4, for peace in your environment, is find your one thing. So here, what if you could just make your tornado disappear? What So the question that we ask at MAPS Business Coaching and at the One Thing is, what's one thing that in so doing would make everything else easier or unnecessary? So take a look at what's in your tornado and fill in the blank here. So I just wrote these questions to ask yourself, gosh, if I could just blank, then that would make all of this so much easier. And heck, if I could do blank, then I wouldn't have to worry about some of this at all. That's supposed to say wouldn't. I kind of rushed through my slides. Um, and maybe it would be if I could get out of debt, if I could improve my relationship with my spouse, if I could find someone to manage my business, if I could close my business, if I could open a business, if I could get my health under control, if I just had a quiet place to work, if I could get help with the kids, if I could start saying no, if I could keep more of what I earn, what is that one thing that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Some of those things on the tornado, in your tornado, if you are able to get this one thing done, you wouldn't need to do those. It wouldn't even be on your to-do list anymore. So that's something that we would work on, is finding your one thing. And your one thing can't be change your identity and move to Mexico. But it might, it might could be, but that would make your tornado disappear. um, let's see. All right, so now I thought I would try and find music for timers and come up with some clever thing to do during times that I gave you exercises. And I don't like this 5 minute one. I was just rushing and running fast. And someday this class will be better and I'll have a better video to use as a timer. But what I want you to do right now, we've got several exercises, is to take the next 5 minutes and write down the things that are in your tornado, your open cycles of action that you've started and not completed, or things that people have put in your tornado that are not yours, just what's open out there that's causing you chaos and keeping you from having your peace in your life because they've not been taken to a finish. Um, you know what? Before we do this, I wanted to talk to you about single handling. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. I should put a slide in here about it. Single handling is probably one of the best ways to create time in your life. We are in, especially with email, a very bad habit of overhandling things, overhandling our to-dos, overhandling what people want from us, because we're not going through and asking the questions, can I finish this now? And can I delegate it and put it on the calendar? Though that is how you single handle things. What typically happens in most of our worlds is we'll have someone leave us a voicemail and say, hey, call me back about this. And that's now an open cycle of action for you. You know you need to return this person's call, and until you've handled whatever they want, that's an open cycle of action. It's in your tornado, it's causing you stress. And instead of picking up the phone and calling them right away, we might decide that we don't want to do that right then. We just put it in our tornado. We need to call this person back. So, and then they leave another message, and it might just be a couple hours later. And then you call them back, but maybe you're playing phone tag. It's still an open cycle of action. And you leave messages back and forth. And you're supposed to set a meeting up now. But you're not able to coordinate a time for a meeting. And then they send you an email with what they want from you or needs to be done. And it's an open cycle of action. And now it's getting to be a bigger and bigger and bigger open cycle of action. And you still don't get something scheduled, and you still don't get it handled. And you just leave it there. And then the next day you look at, okay, what am I supposed to do today? And you go, all right, I have this open cycle of action. I need to do this and this and this and call this person. And then you can call that person and say, you know what, I don't have time to deal with this right now. I'll try and look at it tomorrow. And what ends up happening is you look at that over and over and over and over and over and over again. And before you know it, you might have now something that's urgent that's come out of it. And then you've put it off for a little bit, you've touched it, you know it's there, it's an open cycle of action. And then they go, okay, this is urgent. And now we have these problems that's come out of it. So we need to have a meeting about all these things and what are we going to do to resolve it. And then you call your assistant and have your assistant start working on something. And it just snowballs into something that could have been handled if you would have just returned the phone call right away and given somebody a piece of information. So that's what overhandling looks like. I'll get a better example for the next time that we're in the class, but touch it once. And when it comes to you, take it to a finish. Um, and if you've got too much on your plate, you're not going to be able to take something to a finish because you're in the middle of something else and you're going to have to stick it in your tornado because you're dealing with everything else that's in your tornado and you're dealing with what's urgent. Um, and the only way that you're not going to be living like that is if you start single handling things so that you're not sticking new stuff in your tornado. Um, and then when you do create that space in your life, you're not going to go, I don't have time now, I'll do it tomorrow, or I don't have time now, I'm going to just push it off. It's on so and so and expect they'll do it, and but not follow up with them. And now you've got this big problem. You won't have to worry about any of that because you've got room in your life, and you allowed an extra 10 minutes before your meeting, or you allowed a couple of hours time blocked on your schedule every day just to take care of what's urgent that you wouldn't normally have time for that has just come up out of nowhere. But if you don't create the space in your life for it, it's just going to go in your tornado. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about single handling because I hadn't spent much time on that. So now I'd like for you to take 5 minutes to write down everything that you can think of in your tornado. And that is an open cycle of action that you need to confront. And then we'll come back. So I'm going to play this. I don't know how it's going to work. We will find out, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Oh, it's not going to work. This sounds terrible. All right, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And you can turn yourself on mute. You can turn your cameras off if you want, but just start writing that down. It's 9:35 on my clock right now, so let's be back here at 9:40. All right, guys, 1 minute. I can hear one of my incompleted cycles of action right now. I have a waterfall right out my window in the yard, not a real one, a fake one with a pond and a pump. And my pond is too low, and I should have turned on a water hose and put a little more water in it this morning, and I didn't. It's an open cycle of action, and now I hear my pump going. So there's an open cycle of action, but it's honestly the little things like that that add up. Alrighty, everybody come back. Let me see you, and let's get off mute.
You can just install an auto top off for that pond there.
What did you say?
So you just install an auto top off for that. So I mean, like, it's a thing. I could get it permanently out of the tornado, right?
Right. That works.
I have a fish tank where that used to be the thing, right? I'm like, oh my God. And I have to constantly, like, every day, right? Nope, automated now. Perfect.
And then the other thing is I forget to turn the water hose off, then the pond's spilling all over the place.
Yeah, exactly, right? Not ideal.
So who wants to share a couple things that you identified in your tornado? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. Right now it's just house projects. So, like, there's my business, and there are house projects, which seemingly take up way too much time. So we just redid floors. Of course, we did those ourselves. Still need to finish up the stairs. Need to order a couple things and figure out exactly how I'm going to do that, right? And so that's just looming there. And I'm building a desk for my kids because, they're homeschooling. So
Right.
that's something that needs to happen, right? Much sooner rather than later, but I'm a perfectionist, so the desk is going to be amazing, but it's taking way too much time, right? Then, like, building a picture frame for my wife for this other project, like, and it's just, oh my gosh, right? It's okay. I've got a couple hour window, like, somehow that's on, in my calendar between meetings. Do I work on one of those things, or do I work on my business?
Right.
So it's just, yeah, things that are constantly up in the air for me right now.
Okay.
That I suppose that I don't know if that fits your definition,
It does.
because they're not exactly something that you can single handle
Well,
at all.
that's where we go through the questions. Yeah, it's something that's yours, probably in the grand scheme of things with your family and your bigger picture.
Yeah.
You want to be doing things like this for your family. Can you handle it?
Right.
No. Can somebody else do it? Maybe you could hire somebody to do it. But is it something that you put on your schedule? And that's where you could get a yes here, is that you could time block for it. So if it's not time blocked and it's not on your calendar, it's in your tornado. And it's going to be causing you stress, and when am I going to be able to get this done? And if you can put it on your calendar, it won't just bring you more peace. It's going to bring more peace to the people who are wanting that from you, to be able to say, you know what, I blocked some time out, whenever it might be, Friday from 3 to 7 o'clock, I'm going to work on building a desk. And so that's how this works, and that's how you're able to get it still and out of your tornado, getting it on your calendar. Do you think that's something you can do?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I kind of tried to just knock out that picture frame, finishing that one up this morning. I was like, I just want to be done with this, right? So glued up the last corner.
Handle it right now.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, all right, before I even like make coffee or have bread, like I'm just doing it. So, but which actually helped because I knew that was something that was on the to-do list today, right?
All
So,
right.
but anyways,
Okay. Anybody else? What's in your tornado? John, hi.
I'll take a shot at it, because I put down some things and they really are big picture things. I think I'm pretty good at handling the tasks and getting them done, touching things once, as you said, or at least planning on the succession to get those things done. But when it comes to the big picture stuff, I noticed that everything on my list kind of blended in to one another. It's all dependent on one another, so to speak. Whether it's challenges, pervasive challenges at work and health, or I'm in the stage where I'm kind of planning for my exit out of full-time work, and those kind of things, and they all blend together. So one of the notes I made about what you said earlier was one thing, identifying one thing. And I'm looking at my list and it's like, man, I can't identify one thing. They're all like really big things that all kind of play into each other.
Right. So maybe we can look at your list in time and see if we can figure out one thing there. So
I retire, I'm just going to cross everything off my list.
that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you retire, it might make them all go away. So that might be your one thing is retirement. So, but
the other things all lead to retirement, right?
Yeah.
and then it's just
no way.
if it's a big thing like that, that's a Sunday thing. That's where, all right, there's not anything that you can do right now to take it to a finish. But you can break it down into something so that you're making consistent progress towards it. And just compounding things together until one day you just got it done. So then I've got another exercise here. I don't know if I'll necessarily give you 5 minutes on it, but I do want you to find something. Is to find something on your list that you can make be still. And we kind of did this with Greg's example already, but what's something on your list that you can make be still, and take it out of your tornado just by asking those questions? Is it mine? Is it something that I want? Can I handle it right now? Can someone else do it? Can I put it on my schedule? And then the other question to ask that's a little outside of that is what will be damaged if this doesn't get handled? Just because maybe it's nothing and then it really just doesn't need handled and you can take it off your list. So take like 2 minutes to just write down the one thing that you'll make stay still and what you can do. You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to go turn on my water hose for the pond. I'll be right back.
Single handle that.
All right, I'm back. You know what? So now that reminded me of something else that I could talk to you guys about, and that is our own ceilings of achievement. So when you hit a ceiling and you're tempted to just be like, put it back in your tornado. I don't want to deal with it. I'm out of breath from running down to the pond. That you don't want to deal with it or something like that. You've got a ceiling here that you're hitting. And a lot of times we'll blame that ceiling on other people. But the only thing that ceiling is how hard you think it should be. So I remembered when I went down there why I hadn't turned the water hose on for the pond in a few days. And the reason I hadn't is because we had a freeze a few days ago, and I unhooked the water hose from the house. Normally, the water hose would not be unhooked from the house, and I would just have to turn it on to fill the pond up. And that is my expectation of how hard it should be. And then I go, man, now I'll have to rehook the water hose up and turn it on. This is like it takes like an extra 10 seconds to put the water hose on. But you know what? It made me procrastinate and not do it then. It was actually a ceiling of achievement for me because I thought it shouldn't be that hard, right? How hard are you willing for it to be to hook the stupid water hose up to the house and take the extra 10 seconds? So there's some things that you look at in your tornado, and you look at your willingness level. And when you're looking at ceilings that you're hitting with not getting things done, there's a self-imposed with how hard do I believe this should be. That is a little tiny, stupid example, but I procrastinated because of that. I know there was at least a couple of other times I thought to do that and I didn't do it just because I knew I'd have to hook the water hose back up to the house. So there's some things in life too that you want to get done or that's on your to-do list, and you expect that it should be this hard. And this is your level of willingness, is this hard. And then you get into it and it turns out that it's going to be this hard. It might not even be like this hard. It's just this hard instead of this hard. And that's enough that you hit your ceiling of achievement and you quit and it shouldn't be that hard. I was only supposed to be this hard. And we'll stop and we'll ditch the whole thing and we'll start over and we'll do something else instead. And we waste so much time and energy starting things, hitting our own self-imposed ceiling of achievement because we just don't think it should be this hard. We think it should only be this hard or this hard. But whatever you decide is how hard you think it should be. Once you hit how hard you think it should be and how hard you're willing for it to be, that's your ceiling of achievement. And if you want to get something done in there, you have to just decide that it's okay that it's hard. Right? It's okay that things are hard. It's okay that I actually had to hook the water hose up to the house before I turned the water on. Right? It's okay that it's hard. And some things are going to be remarkably harder than other things. And some things might truly be hard enough that it's not worth doing. But most of the time, it's worth doing. It's totally worth doing. And we're just quitting because we've hit our own ceiling of achievement. That's our willingness of how hard we think it should be, and we want to stay right. That'll screw us up in everything in life. That'll screw us up in our relationships even, to go, I'm not going to work any harder on this relationship because this is the level of willingness of how hard I think I should have to work on a relationship, or how hard I should have to work on my business. And you won't budge an inch to get to where you need to be. Or maybe you need to budge a mile, but that ceiling is still where you set it. That ceiling is your willingness. So if you want something to be better in your life, or you want to get something done and it's not happening, look at where's your level of willingness. And a lot of times we're not going to go past that just because we don't want to be wrong, right? You're like, this is how hard it should be. It shouldn't be any harder than that. I know that. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to be right about this. And I'm not budging. I'm not working harder. I'm not putting any more into this, period, end of story. And we might not say that out loud, but that's what happens every time you hit a ceiling. So, sorry, that was a little side note just because I remembered that I didn't turn the water hose on because I hadn't reattached it to the house yet. And it was a little tiny bit harder than I thought it should be.
That was awesome, though. It resonates quite a bit, right?
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. What are you thinking?
Oh, I mean, just simple tasks, right? There's one. I mean, in just a mundane, thing, right? I mentioned I have a fish tank, right? It's salt water, and so mixing the salt is one thing, but then I have to test to make sure it's the right salinity. And the little refractometer thing that I have is kind of a hassle. Like, it's pain. You have to calibrate it every single time and go through and double check. And you have to like put droplets of water in, for that water, and then the calibration solution. Then you maybe add more fresh water to it, and
Right.
heaven forbid doesn't have, or you have to add more salt to it, and I mean, but it might take 5 minutes, right? Like, it's really not that big of a deal.
It's hard.
Right. It's not that big of a deal, right? Like, and I could be like listening to a podcast or audio, whatever, while I'm doing that, not really interrupting a whole lot. So, I mean, it just, so many little things, right? It's just funny that you mentioned that, because never really thought about it that way, and it's so true.
That's what's in our tornado.
Yeah,
Things like that we've not
just a little.
because they're harder. We got to a point where they're harder than we think it should be. It takes a little bit longer than we think it should, so we put it back in the tornado.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's something you've done maybe before, number of times, like you've hooked up a hose before, right? Like, it's not really like, I was thinking about like the flooring, right? I'm like, oh gosh, it's really not that hard, We knocked most of that out in a couple of days, but yeah, it's just what you build it up to be, I suppose. Anyways, thank you. Thank you for interjecting that. I think that's good. I thought that was valuable.
Yeah, well, we can thank the freeze on September 8th. That was ridiculous.
What was that?
That we can thank the freeze on September 8th for making us.
Yes.
It's a little ridiculous. All right, let's move on here. So I've got another exercise that is to just write. You looked at the one thing that you can confront. What's one thing that you can do now to make a difference with that thing that you were confronting? And it might not be taking it to a finish. It might be getting it on your calendar. But to look at what is one thing you can do now to make a difference. Like when we get off of this call, what can you do? So just write that down. And here's a hint. You haven't done it yet. And like Greg said, it might not be something we don't have experience with, but you haven't done it yet. So by definition, it will be out of your comfort zone. Whatever it is that you can do now is not necessarily in your comfort zone, or you would have already done it. We do stuff that's inside of our comfort zone all the time. We don't put stuff off that's inside of our comfort zone. We put stuff off because in our head, we made it to be harder than it's going to be. We don't know how hard it's going to be. We don't know if we have what it takes. And all of this stuff is going to be something that's going to stretch you. So just the hint here is, if you haven't done it yet, it will be, by definition, out of your comfort zone. So what can you do right now? All right, let's see. Now, does anybody else, before we move on to internal peace? So I spent an hour on external peace. I figure in our environment, well, before I dig into all the internal peace and relational peace stuff, does anybody want to have any questions about external peace and peace in your environment before we start moving on to this crazier stuff? All right, I'm going to take that as permission to move on. All right, so now you have a little more control over your environment. You've said no, you don't have as many plates spinning, you're cleaning up your yard, you're taming your tornado, you've taken your head out of the sand, you're not afraid of the hard work, but you're still filled with anxiety and you're still worried about the next storm that's certainly right on the heels of the last one. And sure, you've done all you can do. You're being the best steward of what you have, but there's still so much unknown that you're dealing with a lot of internal anxiety and chaos and lack of peace. So what do you do about that? I do not have all the answers here, guys. This is just kind of what I'm learning for myself. So if you have any answers, chime in and let me know. Don't be afraid to come off mute and interrupt me at any time and wave your hand. All right, guiding principle number 1 here is surrender. When we get to the end of the class and I've gone through more, you'll see that everything for me comes down to 2 things: surrender and stewardship. Surrender is not just letting something run you over. Surrender is not crumbling under pressure. Surrender is not just accepting that things won't get better. Surrender is stopping trying to make the wrong things go right. So when we're looking at everything that was in our tornado before, and we're picking out those things one at a time, when we get to this part, we'll be looking at some of those things and we're trying to make the wrong things go right. It's not something for us to change. And in so doing, we neglect making the right things go right. And that's where stewardship comes in. Stewardship is making the right things go right. Surrender is stop trying to make the wrong things go right. We may have decided in our heads that this is absolutely what we want. And we will push and we will force and we will use all kinds of pressure. Bye, John. Thanks for staying while you could. You're on mute. You're on mute, so I can't hear you.
Sorry to interrupt. I just have to leave, caller. I know you're aware of it. Thank you all. Good luck. Look forward to hearing the rest of this on the recording later on today. Thank you.
Good to have you.
Take care. Bye, John. All right. So, surrender and stewardship. We will be hell-bent on trying to make something go right that we can't make go right. That's not ours. And that may not even get us where we want to go. So surrender is stop trying to make the wrong things go right. So when you're a good steward of your environment, you're going to weather the little storms fine. You're taking care of things, you're single-handling, you're leaving space, you're leaving room. You've got time for little storms. You've got time for things and energy for things to kind of, the little things in life to knock you off and not get totally knocked off your path. And the things that used to knock you off your feet, they won't even register. You won't even notice them anymore just because you left room for them. But there's still going to be big storms. Gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start crying. Now, yesterday was my brother's birthday, so there's going to be storms like that come up. There's going to be storms like that come up that they will totally knock you off your feet. And you might never be able to get up from them. You might never really be able to heal. Life will never be the same.
Oh, we lose her?
She's totally froze up, but the rest of you aren't.
Yeah, I think it must be her. She...
Are you there?
Okay, now you're back.
It's-
Oh, you're back.
You
No.
It says I lost my connection. All right. I don't know where I left off there. Can you guys all hear me now? Okay. Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, but knowing those big storms are coming and they will come, you just don't want to have a bunch of chaos in the rest of your life when those things happen. You want to be able to give attention to life when those things happen. And you're just not able to do that if you don't have the peace created in your environment. And you've got a lot of other little storms that are knocking you all the time. So anyway, I'm just saying I don't know the answer to the big storms, but I know it sure helps to not have the little storms knocking you off all the time. All right, so surrender. Guiding principle number 2 is going to be admiration. This is something that I try to explain to a few people, and it's very hard for a lot of people to even fathom. A lot of times there's some really ugly things, and the only way that you can be at peace with them is to learn to appreciate and admire some really ugly things. And we're going to fight against that and go, this shouldn't be this way. This is wrong. How could I come to appreciate or admire something like that? That you would be not in integrity if you were able to appreciate or admire something that is less than good. So when we're in admiration, here, I didn't write this out right. We're accepting someone or something as it is. We're not trying to change it or control it and wish that it's different somehow. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to find a way to accept something, much less admire it. Admiring something or allowing something to be, granting it beingness, just letting it be there. Being willing to see things from someone else's viewpoint, accepting that you don't see the whole picture and you never will. And that God's the only one who sees the whole picture, and He's allowing it. So who are we to not allow it? I had experience. We've been traveling a lot lately, except not so much during COVID. But one of our trips earlier this year, we went to Zanzibar. So here is just a difference in paradigm, where here in the United States, if we saw something like this, we would not admire it. We would not find any way in the world to be able to admire this kind of thing. So we leave the airport, we get in our cab, and on the way to the resort, the cab driver gets pulled over for speeding or something. I don't know, because they're speaking in Swahili, but you could get a gist of what's going on. So he gets like belligerent with the officer, and he's like yelling at him, and you can tell he's like, I got Americans in the back seat here. So he's going back and forth, and he's getting belligerent with the officer. He ends up getting out of his car and just like arguing and fighting with this police officer. And there's another police officer across the street. He pulled somebody else over. It's a dirt road, actually. This guy's a big dude. He gets out of his car too, and he's like over this police officer, yelling, screaming at him. They're fighting. I'm like, holy cow, this is just like how they do things around here. So then there's another police officer, and they're just pulling people over for speeding, right? So then there's like a senior police officer that comes over to our cab driver, and then our cab driver is like yelling at him and telling him what's going on and saying he has Americans in the back seat. And that senior police officer, he goes, all right, I mean, in Swahili, but you can tell he's like, all right, fine, go ahead. Right? He lets him off on a warning. So then we're like, holy cow. Then we're able to, at first we were not wanting to allow or accept it. We're thinking, oh my goodness, there's going to be a shooting here and we need to hide in the floorboard. How low can we get inside the back of this car? But then, I mean, we see what happened and how things are just not the same. Their paradigm's totally different from ours. And we're able to appreciate then that, you know what, they just argue with police officers until they get let off the hook, and that's like how things are going to go. And they would think we were crazy to not argue with a police officer, because then they're just going to give us a ticket and we're just going to take it. They can't afford to do that. They don't make enough money to just be paid speeding tickets. So you admire then the difference in the culture. So that's where just see that you're not seeing things the same way. You're not seeing the same paradigm. And if that same thing would have happened in the United States, we would have thought there's no way in the world that we could admire something like that. Somebody getting out of their car and being belligerent and aggressive with a police officer, something bad is going to happen. But just understanding that we don't share the same paradigms, and that if you did truly share the same paradigm, that you would be able to get to a place where you could admire just about anything, no matter how horrible it sounds to us. And it doesn't mean that it's something that you allow in your life. It might even be something that you fight against. I don't like the word fight against, because I don't like putting force against things. But it's not something that we necessarily want in our lives. But it is something that we can come to peace with by having a paradigm shift. Another example of that, I was going to use this for later in relational peace, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit now because it'll show the difference in how you can admire something. So I'm not going to divulge who this was that I was talking to, but I was talking to someone who was complaining to me about some problems that they were having in a relationship. And the problems that they were having in the relationship is he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that, and she's just not allowing and accepting all of these things that are bad things. And one of the things was he's always has to be right, and he's proud, right? And he will say, I know this is right and this is how it is, and they are wrong, and I know this is how they're right. I know that I'm right. I'm 100% sure I'm right, and he'll just go on and on about how right he is. And then something will happen, and it turns out he was wrong, but he won't apologize for it, and he won't say anything. He just lets it go. And she's like, even our counselor said this is a problem. This is pride, and it is a big problem, and he needs to deal with it. So I'm like, how can you get to a place where you admire that in him? When it's something, she's like, I couldn't admire that. That's a horrible trait. It's, pride. That's a big sin, even. I'm not supposed to admire that. So, but I had a little bit more of a personal experience with this because I do the same thing. Like I study a lot, I learn a lot, I think I know a lot, and I think I'm right all the time. I think we can probably all say that we think we're right? We're human beings. But I will be pretty insistent that I'm right. I'm like, this is how it is. I know I'm right. And it's usually about cooking something in the kitchen or something like that. I know I'm right. This is absolutely how it is, and you're wrong, and just, butt out or whatever. So I do that with my husband. And he has a totally different reaction to it. And he allows, we'll get to it later in the class, something about creating safety zones. So he gives me a safety zone there where he allows me to have that fault. He's not saying that it's not a fault. Yes, it's pride, it's bad, But you know what? We're all human beings and we all have our faults and we all have our weaknesses. So he allows that. And not only does he allow it, he accepts it and appreciates it. And he's gotten to a place where he can admire that and go, and you know what he says? Instead of you shouldn't be proud, he says, I love how passionate you are. And he'll give me a peck on the forehead and give me a wink because I know I'm wrong. I know I was wrong, but that safety zone that he's creating for me is he doesn't make me eat crow. And this other person was wanting that other person to eat crow, right? This is just how you admire and allow things. So if you can look at what are some things that you're not allowing in life, that you're like, it shouldn't be that way, that he's wrong, the situation is wrong, that shouldn't be this hard, this is not what should be happening, you're fighting against that. You're putting force against something. And it's not about putting force against something. It's about you be steadfast in your values, but maybe not a value of how other people should be, but a value of how you can be loving and about how you can allow and appreciate things. And the other piece of this is to do that with yourself, to allow those faults in yourself and to appreciate and even admire those in yourself. So that's guiding principle number 2 is admiration. And that's the steps that you take. What am I not allowing? How do I allow it? How do I accept it? How do I appreciate it? How do I admire it? And take yourself up that ladder if you can. And a big piece of it is going to be realizing that you don't see the whole picture no matter what. All right, guiding principle number 3 for internal peace is loving yourself. Stop judging yourself, others, and your circumstances as good or bad. We just don't have the whole picture. If you decide that something is good or bad, you are judging it. And there's a reason that we're not supposed to judge. It's because we have only a sliver of what's true. And when we have only a sliver of what's true in a circumstance or in another person or in yourself, we don't have any way of judging what's good or bad. All we can do is allow it and admire it, knowing that we don't have the whole picture. Next thing would be to speak kind things to yourself, to give yourself grace and allow yourself to not be broken. And the other thing is, with loving yourself, is leaving space. And we talked before in your environment about leaving space. Leave space for you to do things wrong. Don't just leave space for things to go wrong and things to happen in your life. Leave space for you to screw up. Leave room for you to do things wrong, because it's going to happen. And if you've not left space for yourself, just like emotionally, that it's okay for things to go wrong, and literally leave yourself space on your calendar to know I'm going to screw something up and it's going to go wrong and I'm going to have to go back and fix something and I'm going to have to learn. And if you don't leave yourself time for that and space for that, you're going to beat yourself up over it, because it's going to be creating lots more consequences in your life and other people's life. Accept that you're not perfect. Allow for the fact that you're not perfect. Admire yourself as an imperfect creature and honor it. Honor that you're not perfect. And the way that you honor that you're not perfect is you give yourself space for it so that you can let it happen. So there's loving yourself is the next guiding principle for internal peace. The next one I have here, I think I have my numbers off, is to recharge. It's really easy to just go. And this is about leaving space, not just to be wrong, but leaving your space to recharge, because that's part of not being perfect too, is you need to recharge. You need to recharge in your relationships. You need to take vacations. You need to be able to just leave the stresses that go with it and with your work and everything and all your unfinished business and all these open cycles of action and everything that you're worrying about, just put them on a shelf or on a calendar and get away from your tornado and recharge for a little bit. So make sure that when you're doing your time blocking on your calendar, the first thing that you block off is time to recharge and time for yourself. So I know Linda does this.
Yeah, I think vacations are crucial and just taking that time and every day. And I mean, as you know, we're going through one of the worst storms of our lives right now that I don't know that anyone else knows that we had lost our son in May in a car accident. And it's been a really horrible summer of trying to get back into work and such. But one of my saving graces this summer has been, I decided that I was going to do a hike every single morning with the dogs. And that's become my very meditative ritual. And that and meditation has actually saved both Bob and I through all of this. So definitely, we have it on our schedule every day.
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to go ahead and do another exercise with you guys now. I had you look before at what is in your tornado. And I want you to look now at what are you not allowing? What is something that you're just going, I don't think it should be this way? Or a person that you're going, I don't think it should be this way. And you're fighting against it. And you're fighting against it. And you're fighting against it. And you're just not allowing it to happen. It's not going to work to play the song, but I was going to play Let It Be by the Beatles for a timer. But yeah, just think about that. I'm going to give you guys maybe 5 minutes because I really want you to think about this, about what are you not allowing? What do you think should change? What do you think is wrong? And what are you putting force against that you're not able to change? So 5 minutes, my clock says 10:21. I'll be back here at 10:26. All right, how are you guys doing? We're almost done here. All right. Does anybody want to come off mute and talk about something that you realize that you're not allowing? That's something you don't really have any control over. Nobody? All right. Live classes are a little bit easier. Going to move on to the next slide here. So I'm not necessarily going to give you much extra time for this, but I want you to ask yourself a couple questions about it. If it's something that you're not allowing, how has you not allowing it made any difference? By not allowing it, has it ceased to exist? Has it gone away? And then how is your attitude about it and your force against it affecting you? And how is your attitude about it or your force against it affecting the situation or the other person? So here, acknowledge it. Sometimes we ignore what's right in our face and it ends up harming us. If you ignore something and you don't acknowledge it, you're not going to see the harm coming from it. If you don't allow it, if you don't grant it beingness, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It can end up harming you. If you face it and you allow it and you accept it and you find admiration in it, you're going to be watching it then. And when you're watching it and you're allowing it and you're getting in relationship with it, it's going to be a lot less likely to cause you harm than if you're ignoring it. So accept that it is the way it is, that you can't change it. Maybe you expected something of someone else and you didn't accept the fact that it just wasn't important to them. So here's how it could harm you. This is about being right again. You can say, so-and-so should do this, and they should be this way. And I know I'm right about that. And I'm not accepting that, I'm not allowing that it's not important to them. I'm not going to do it because it's not my job. This is their job, and I'm not going to allow for them to not do it. And that's how that thing that you're not allowing and admiring and accepting is going to come back and smack you in the face, because you're just going to leave it undone. It doesn't matter if it's important to them or not, if they're doing their job, if something's just not the way that it should be. If you don't allow for it, and that's what allowing is, that's part of it, and part of what honoring is you're allowing for it. You're allowing for it to go wrong. You're allowing for it not to be how you think it should be. And if you don't allow for it, you're not leaving room for it, there will be consequences that you're not leaving room for. So I was going to ask here, what's something that you lost because you couldn't control it and you refused to allow it to be how it was, and you didn't allow room and you didn't allow space for it to be what it is? So you just think about that. If you maybe jot it in your notes. All right, next is to look at that same thing that you're not allowing and to go, what's that next step? What can you appreciate? What can you do now to change your paradigm and widen that a little bit, to allow the situation or the person to just exist in the world as they are? What can you do to make space for it, to allow for it, and honor that situation, honor that person, grant it beingness. So now I'm not going to give you 5 minutes again because we'll totally end up running out of time for the class, but to just jot down real quick if there's anything that comes to mind. And if not, save the question for later. What can you do to move from allow, accept, appreciate, admire? All right, so that's all I've got on internal peace, and we're ready to move on to relational peace. I'd like everybody to come off mute now, if you can. Even if you're not going to say anything, come off mute anyway, because then you can just talk if you decide to just talk. And just share with me if there's anything that you learned that you would apply from the exercises and what we just went over, and if there's anything you would add to it that you found helps bring you.
Guess I'll just run. I mean, the admiration piece was definitely interesting, right? We don't always have to understand, others. Just admire their passion, maybe, right? So, and yeah. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting and something that can definitely apply. We may not be able to change it, but yeah. Anyways.
So how does everybody feel about the whole principle of this? Because I know there's a lot of people who just aren't willing to. And I feel like if you're not willing to, then you're not going to have internal peace. If you're not willing to surrender and allow things. But we are very much against as humans to be right and to be proud and to make allowances. And sometimes it can seem like it's out of integrity and wrong to make those allowances. Is anybody feeling that way?
You are totally cutting out, Carla, so I only got about half of what you said. I don't know if that's on my end or...
Am I cutting out with anybody else?
Yes.
Cut out just a little bit there. It was just there. You seem better now. You were fine before.
Yeah, it just the last 30 seconds or so.
I really think it has something to do with all the kids are online for school too.
Yeah.
We're all on Zoom calls, the whole house.
That's a lot to manage in itself.
At least I can't interrupt their Zoom calls. Their teachers don't want me interrupting, and so I don't get interrupted either. So do I need to repeat anything?
What was the last thing that you just talked about? Because it was kind of, I was getting like every other word.
Okay. Can you guys hear me better now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So just that a lot of people believe and feel like it's out of integrity to allow things that they do not believe are right. And that's where we have a lot of unrest, is because they think it's wrong to allow for something that they do not believe is right. That our job and what we should do in integrity is to fight against those things. It's a really big change for people to look at it this way. So just wanted to see what your thoughts are on that, and if anybody's struggling a little bit with that.
I think it's hard in general to, when somebody isn't kind of in the same place that you are, to put yourself in their place and to honor what they're thinking or what they're doing. And even though you don't agree to be able to move forward, I think that's a hard thing in general, is to be able to just, meet them there.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to relational piece. A lot of this is going to be the same. You can have peace internally, maybe if you have some chaos externally or in relationships. You might just be ignoring everything and putting your head in the sand. But you're not going to be able to have relational peace if you don't have internal peace and peace in your environment. It's going to cause problems in your relationships. So you do have to have those things handled before you can expect to have any peace in relationships. And I mean primary relationships with your family, with friends, and with people at work that you work with every day. And we have to remember that it goes both ways, that we're not going to be able to have relational peace with someone else if they have chaos internally and if they have chaos in their environment. We just have to understand that if they have internal chaos and they have external chaos, they're not going to be able to have a relationship with you that chaos doesn't spill over into, and there will not be peace in that relationship. And you can only control yourself. So just because you take the steps for relational peace doesn't mean that all of your relationships are going to be peaceful, because they're not going to necessarily have internal and external peace. Relational peace happens when they allow, honor, and appreciate you, and you allow, honor, and appreciate them. And it has to go both ways. So guiding principle number 1 here, I've got is be vulnerable. I think the best things to read on this is Brené Brown, and Simon Sinek spent some time on it too. Simon's latest book, what was his latest book? Oh, I forgot the name of it. But Simon's latest book, he spent some time in there talking about being vulnerable with your staff, and how when they're vulnerable, giving them permission to be vulnerable, giving them permission to make mistakes, and not have to worry about consequences of just being human or losing their job or things like that, that they're going to bring their problems to you. They're going to let you know when they did something wrong. It's not going to roll into lots of problems if they're trying to hide from you. But in order to give other people permission to be vulnerable, you have to be vulnerable first. And there are some people out there that you don't want to be vulnerable with. So I want to say this carefully, because I've been in life-threatening situations. I don't want to share, everything about it, but I was a homicide prevention case with Colorado Springs Police Department. I was in a very dangerous situation, and they wanted me to change my name and social security number and leave the state. People like that, you don't want to be vulnerable with, right? So, but in most cases with healthy people who aren't crazy, being vulnerable gives them permission and room to be vulnerable. It's just creating a safe place. So first, own your faults, be okay with yourself, that internal peace where you still love yourself in spite of all your faults and being wrong, and you're leaving room for yourself to not be perfect and to screw up. Do that for yourself and do that for others too. And know that it's okay to fail. It's okay to look stupid. It's okay to not get anywhere, and not worry about what others think about you. It's really hard for me. I really care what other people think about me. And everybody's like, well, the older you get, the less you'll care. I'm about to turn 46 this month. I still care as much as I did when I was 25. I know I can't. I've learned some things since then, but it's really important to me what people think of me. And I've definitely seen how little control I have of that. Guiding principle number 2. This is, if I can recommend here, Stan Tatkin and Greg Bear for authors to read. Just read everything you can get your hands on from these guys. This concept is from Stan Tatkin's book. Your Brain on Love and Wired for Love are two that are very good about creating a safe place for people to not be perfect, to accept and admire them for their faults. So this is similar to or actually the same thing that we talked about before, where yes, I'm proud, and yes, I say that I'm right, and yes, I know that I was totally wrong, and that safety bubble for me is Josh doesn't make me eat crow, right? He doesn't expect me to eat crow. He knows that me being right is tied a lot to my self-worth, and me being able to be correct is how I still, in my broken self, believe that people value me, and that he's not going to make me feel like less of a person by making me eat crow. That he'll allow me to ignore it, and he'll just make that space for my faults. So it's giving grace, and it's giving grace for people when they're proud. It's giving grace for people when they're anxious, and not to tell them they shouldn't be anxious. It's giving grace to people when they don't like hanging out with your family. And it's not saying you shouldn't be that way, and you shouldn't do that, and you should be better. It's just saying it doesn't matter what you should or shouldn't do. It doesn't matter what would make your life easier or my life easier. This is who you are and how you are, and I accept you like this. Even if you're going to work on it, if you're not going to work on it, and I'm going to allow for it. And I'm going to give you a safe place to be a broken person. So it could be something like if they don't like hanging out with your family, or they feel really uncomfortable around your dad, that to say, you know what, I know you feel uncomfortable with that. I would really love for you to go with me. But if it gets to be too much for you, I'll make sure that you're not in the same room alone with him. And if it gets to be too much for you, it doesn't matter if we've only been there 15 minutes. If you need to get out of there, give me a nod or whatever you decide on beforehand, and I'll honor that. And I'll know, thank you for making an effort, but I'm not going to make you be in a place that doesn't feel safe for you to be who you are. So it's just allowing for people to be wrong, allowing for people to have faults, allowing for whatever it might be that you think is wrong and they should change, and just giving them a safe place. And that relationship or couple bubble, what they call, is a safe place. So if you're not having peace in relationships, that could be a lot of it, is that honor their faults, allow for them, give them a safe place to be who they are, and don't resent them for it. Just everybody's human. So another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind with this, and it's just a little bit of a side note, is that if you have open cycles with someone, that can decrease your love for them. Because these open cycles in your tornado, all these things that are going on, these expectations that are started, finished, and if it's an expectation someone's putting on you, it's an open cycle. Because if you haven't met it, it's open and it's in your tornado. So if you have someone who is placing a bunch of expectations on you, and you're not meeting the expectations, and you're not closing those cycles of actions, then be careful, because you can start to resent that person, and you can start to blame them for all of this uncertainty and chaos. And then you're going, I'm not good enough, and I'm not able to get this stuff handled, and I'm not able to meet their expectations. So when someone is putting an expectation on you or giving you something to do that's any kind of an open cycle for you, that's not something that you are handling in a way where you can go, is this mine? Can I handle it now? Can I put it on my calendar? And it's just staying out there as an open cycle that you can't close. Be very aware that that can cause your love for that person to decrease. And that it can be important sometimes for you to say no and to not allow things to just go into your tornado so that you can continue loving that person. And know too that when you're putting that on someone else and you're putting expectations on someone else and opening cycles for them and putting it in their tornado, that can decrease their love for you. Just be careful of that. That's what happens when we get under stress and we have too much chaos going on. So what will end up happening is they just don't feel like they're good enough. And when they don't feel like they're good enough, they're going to drag you down, and there's a reason to not love you then. The other thing to keep in mind is kind of the opposite of that. If you give too much to someone, and you're giving 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 and you're giving, and you're not giving them any kind of opportunity to reciprocate that. Oh my goodness, I still need to get into unconditional love, and we've got less than 15 minutes. So, and they're not able to reciprocate that. And they have not learned to love unconditionally. And you have not necessarily learned to love unconditionally. The only kind of love that they are going to understand is going to be imitation love. And this is what most of us live on, is imitation love. And imitation love is when someone is giving you what they want, when someone is making you feel good, when you're having a pretty even trade in a relationship. And if you are giving and giving and giving and giving, and they don't have a way to reciprocate, or they're not willing to reciprocate, then you are putting them in a lower and lower and lower and lower and lower position, and yourself in a higher and higher position the more that you give. And if you don't allow for some way for them to be able to reciprocate, eventually they're going to have to attack you and pull you down, just so that they don't end up being a criminal with taking so much from you. So this is why it can happen that you can give and give and give and give to someone and be like, how could they do that to me? How could they not appreciate this? And it's because you made them lower by giving them so much, and you made them into a criminal, essentially. There's a lot of stuff that could kind of be its own class, and that probably takes a lot more discussion for some good understanding. But I wanted to throw that out there just as some things to be careful of. When you're creating safety bubbles for people, that's a safe place, is not giving too much. It's not a safe place for them when they can't reciprocate. Guiding principle number 3, learn to love unconditionally. Just read Greg Bear. His books on real love. There's no way I could cover it in one slide, but if you're not loving unconditionally, it's just because it's a good trade. It's keeping score, it's even, hey, this relationship feels pretty good because we both feel good and we're both giving about the same, and we're, depositing $10 into the account and they're depositing $10 into the account, and or what I mean, how that works. And that's not unconditional love. It's not because of what they do for you. It's not because you can control them. And Greg Bear talks about getting behaviors. I really want to share an analogy that he gives in his book that I thought was really powerful for me. So getting behaviors that people use are lying and being acting like victims. And this sounds like horrible things, but we all do it. So the example he gives is you bake a loaf of bread in the morning, and you maybe bake several loaves of bread for some people, and you bake a loaf of bread for someone specifically for them because you love them and you just want to give them a loaf of bread. And then you go to give them the loaf of bread, you run across them on the street, and they're not used to someone just unconditionally loving them. They're used to having to earn it or manipulate some people to get what they want. So this person might say, you know what, I haven't eaten all day, I'm starving. Can I have a loaf of bread? And you give them the loaf of bread. Or they might lie and say, hey, I need a loaf of bread for this, can I have a loaf of bread? Or they may intimidate you and say, if you don't give me a loaf of bread, then you're really a bad person. And in so many words or something like that. And they're using these getting behaviors to get you to give them the loaf of bread. And then you give them the loaf of bread, but even though you made it for them out of unconditional love, because they've always used those getting behaviors, they're not even going to be able to see that you did it because you love them. They're not going to ever be able to understand what unconditional love is. They're never going to be able to accept that as a gift, because they're going to always believe that it's because they manipulated you for it. So know that if people are doing things like that, that you can't just necessarily love them and fix it, because they don't understand unconditional love. And we all do this to some extent. And some of them do it, some people do it to an extent where it can really cause damage in your life and your relationships. And some people just need to learn a little bit more about real love. So for peace in relationships, guiding principle number 3, learn to love unconditionally, is a really, really big chore. That's not something that you just learn off of a slide, but if I can encourage you to read Greg Bayer, there's some pretty phenomenal stuff in there. And Stan Tatkin too has been amazing. Guiding principle number 4 for peace in relationships is just don't get in the lion's cage. We can learn to love people unconditionally. We can learn to allow for them. We can learn to accept them. We can learn to even admire them. But part of allowing for someone to be a broken person is to allow that this may be dangerous for you or cause you harm in some way. And there's nothing that you can do about it. And the way that you honor that is to not get in the cage with them. So I didn't really want to spend too much more time on that because the class is at the end, but that's just, for me, I've always have a philosophy of if you love someone enough, then they'll love you back. And it doesn't work that way because some people are too broken. All right, exercise now is to list 3 relationships and how you would like to change the relationship and how you would like to change the person. Write down what it is that they're doing wrong. A big turning point for me was when I made a decision to stop deciding how someone should be and what they should be doing and how that person should change, and looking instead at how I wanted my relationship to change. Because I don't have any power over changing the person. I only have power over changing the relationship. So go ahead. We do not have time. And I've got a couple more slides that I want to get here, but think about that. If you've got somebody at the top of your mind that you can write down, what do you want to change about them? Make a little note about it. The next thing that you would do with that is how can you create a safe place for them to be imperfect? How can you create a safety bubble for them? And then to list 3 things that you admire about the trait that you find is a fault. So if you're not willing to take the steps that we talked about in this class, there's a few things that could be the reason behind that. One is you don't see how, and that you lack the skills and the training and you're uncertain. Most of the time, if you're not willing to do something, it's because you don't have the skills. So like if there's an accident on the side of the road and somebody needs brain surgery on the spot, if you're a brain surgeon, you'll be totally willing to do brain surgery, right? Because you know what you need to do. Well, if you're not a brain surgeon, you're not going to be willing to do brain surgery. You don't have any idea what you're doing. You don't have the skills. So that's part of it. You might just lack the skills. So then it would be training. The other thing that we already talked about is you're afraid it will be too hard. And most of the time, it's just a decision. How hard are you willing for it to be? And it might not actually be that hard. It might be just you're not willing for it to be as hard as connecting the water hose back to the house. But it might actually be too that you place a higher value on something else, and that you're not going to have peace in your life because maybe commitment to a relationship or something like that is more important to you. And that's okay. And that's something you need to allow in your life too. So finding the lead domino. We'll go back to what's the one thing that you can do right now that in so doing will make everything else easier or unnecessary. Linda had to run. So my first domino, and probably the reason I spent a lot of time on this, for everything that I wanted to be able to happen in life, was to find a partner who could share in creating the relationship that I knew would be the foundation of everything else. That without having that kind of relationship in my life, I wouldn't be able to accomplish the other things I wanted to accomplish. There's things I couldn't do by myself. And I couldn't do with a relationship that wasn't really good by how I defined what I wanted in a relationship. So that was my lead domino, and yours might be something totally different, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking at, is what's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary. And then I'll wrap up now with surrender and stewardship. Well, everything for me comes back to this, is surrender means you stop trying to force the wrong things to go right. And I say trying here because you can force and you can push and you can put pressure against something, but you cannot make wrong things go right. It's only going to be trying. Force is the application of pressure, but it doesn't necessarily result in anything. It doesn't always work, because work, like what I use in stewardship here, stewardship means working to make things go right. Work, by definition, causes movement. Work is a force applied against something that causes movement. So stewardship is applying that in a place where you can make things go right. And the only things that you can make go right are the right things. So identifying what are the wrong things that you're trying to make go right is surrender. And stewardship, what are the right things that you need to work to make go right? And to be focusing on those things instead. Force is stuck. If you're not surrendered, you're trying to control and force, and nothing is moving you in the direction that you're pushing. And stewardship is movement. It is work. It is hard sometimes. It is growth. It pushes you out of your comfort zone. It moves you. It takes you to places that you've not seen before, and it transforms you into someone you've never been before. So if you're spending much time with me on anything, you'll hear me talk a lot about surrender and stewardship. For me, those are just what you live your life by. And in coaching, that's part of what we do, is just helping you identify what those things are, and making progress and moving forward in places where you should be moving forward, or you want to be moving forward. Let's see, I think that's about it for the class, and it's time to wrap up. I kind of skipped over. Now my right now exercise, there's no time left in the class, would be that thing that you wrote down that you could do right now to make a difference, is I wanted to give you a few minutes to go do it. But we didn't. And now we're at the end of time. Well, time for the class, not all time. So anyway, this is me. If you want to call me, feel free to call me. My phone numbers are on the screen, 719-200-5006, or you can email me or get in touch with me on Facebook. But anyway, does anybody have anything to share before our last minute is up here?
Thank you, Coach.
You're welcome, Nathan.
Yes,
I'm standing outside. I mean, it's one of the times I had foot surgery on Friday. So when you're talking about, like doing things and not taking care of things, and they end up coming back and biting you in the ass. Yeah. I had an old injury, I'm sorry. I had an old injury that I thought, we had already fixed, reconstructed my foot. But after 8 years of being active and doing stuff, it just, needs to get looked at again, I guess, obviously. So
I'm glad you got it handled.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Coach.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Heck yeah. I got landscaping going on next door. If anybody needs a good landscaper, I got somebody.
It's looking good, huh?
All right. Anybody else, or I'll just let you guys all go?
Oh, thank you. I think there's a lot of action items, a lot of things we can do to make things easier. So that's
All right.
great.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Carla.
Bye, guys.
Bye.